My name is Marilyn, and for the last 4 years, I have been working as a senior project manager at Bennett Construction. Unlike many of my colleagues who complain about our busy schedules, endless customer edits, and the need to keep 100 details in mind at once, I thrive on this pressure. There is something deeply satisfying about bringing a project to completion. Watching the disparate drawings turn into a real, tangible object, feeling the adrenaline before handing over the work when every minute counts, and finally seeing the customer cut the red ribbon at the opening. My apartment in downtown Portland isn't too big, but it's completely mine, or at least it will be once I finish paying off the mortgage. The windows overlook the river, and on clear days, the majestic peak of Mount Hood can be seen from the balcony, towering on the horizon like a reminder of something eternal and unchangeable. I love this place, this view, this silence that fills my apartment in the evenings after a long day at work. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy! This Friday evening, I allowed myself the rare luxury of relaxing with a glass of wine, snuggled in an armchair by the window, when suddenly the phone rang. When I looked at the screen, I saw my mom's name. "Hi, Mom," I replied, holding the phone between my ear and shoulder, at the same time tilting the bottle to pour some more of the tart, rich drink into the glass. There was that special, deliberately laid, back gaiety in her voice that I knew all too well, and which always meant only one thing: she wanted something. "Listen," she began, "your father and I are having a family gathering next Saturday. Everyone will be there, and we really want you to come too. I'll make your favorite lasagna, the one with 3 cheeses and homemade sauce." I rolled my eyes, even though I knew Mom couldn't see it. She understood all too well how I could be lured. My mom's lasagna was legendary. Layers of thin dough, cheese melting in my mouth, and rich tomato sauce with subtle notes of basil and garlic. This was my childhood, my personal gastronomic weakness. "Okay," I sighed, feeling the corners of my lips turn up in a treacherous smile. "I'll be there." "Great!" Mom's voice immediately took on a triumphant note. "We'll expect you at 4. When we hung up, I stood at the window for a while, watching the last rays of the setting sun turn the river water golden pink. It's been a few months since I've seen my parents. Between my 60-hour work week and their busy lives of golf, community theater, and dinners with friends, our meetings were limited to major holidays like Thanksgiving or Christmas. It will be interesting to see Tyler and Tiffany. The twins were 12 years younger than me, and if as a child it seemed to me that there was a gap between us, then over the years the difference only increased. When I was 24 and I was balancing between studying and my first serious job, they were still sitting at school desks, spoiled by the attention of their parents and littered with the most fashionable gadgets. Our parents' approach to parenting has changed dramatically over time. I was taught to be responsible, frugal, and independent. By the age of 12, I was already washing my own clothes, and at 14, I officially became the twins' babysitter when my parents went out for dinners or theater productions. But Tyler and Tiffany grew up in an atmosphere of much less inhibition and much more indulgence. When I moved in at 18, they were still being put to bed on schedule. And now, when they were 24, they both lived in apartments that their parents helped pay for while they were looking for themselves. Tyler changed his major 3 times in college before finally settling on communications, and Tiffany recently quit her job as a barista, saying her boss was completely toxic and was now just enjoying life while waiting for a suitable job. The following Saturday at exactly 4 o'clock in the evening, I turned onto a familiar street and drove up to my parents' house. The house looked the same as I remembered it. Manicured flower beds, a perfectly manicured lawn, a bright stained glass door casting colored highlights into the hallway. Tiffany's bright blue Kia and Tyler's motorcycle were already parked in the driveway. Great. I was the last to arrive, which meant only one thing. They were probably already discussing me. As I approached the front door, I could hear laughter coming from inside, muffled but sincere, the kind that occurs when someone says something particularly funny or perhaps ridiculous. But as soon as I pressed the doorbell, it abruptly stopped, as if an invisible hand had turned off the sound, and for a moment, there was a wary silence in the house. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and prepared to meet my family, trying to convince myself that this was just a coincidence, that I shouldn't look for hidden meaning in their sudden silence. But some sixth sense told me that this evening would be far from as ordinary as I would like. The door opened, and my mother appeared in front of me, wearing her usual linen apron with a floral pattern, smiling slightly tightly, as if she was sincerely glad to see me, but at the same time something inside her was tense, like a taut string. "Marilyn, come in," she said, quickly pulling me into a short but warm embrace, which exuded a homely atmosphere, the smell of garlic, spicy sauce, and light notes of her favorite perfume, familiar to me since childhood. I entered the house, kicked off my shoes at the threshold with a practiced movement, and looked around. The twins were sitting on the sofa in the living room, their heads tilted towards each other in a conspiratorial manner, as in childhood when they came up with another adventure. But as soon as I appeared, they simultaneously raised their eyes and looked at me with the same expression of deliberate nonchalance. "Hi, Jazzy." Tiffany spoke first, lazily twirling a strand of blonde hair around her finger and squinting slightly. "Nice suit from work." She deliberately looked me up and down, as if assessing how much I stood out from this environment with my strict, perfectly pressed jacket and dark trousers, which really looked like I had just left the office. "It's Saturday, you know," she added, clearly implying that I was too busy with work again to even change before the family dinner. I didn't correct her. "Hi, Tiffany, Tyler." I nodded to my brother, who answered me only with a short, hesitant wave of his hand, without even getting up from the couch. I went into the dining room where I could hear the clink of china and saw my mother setting out the family service on the table, the one we only took out on special occasions, Thanksgiving or Christmas. I slowed my pace, staring intently at the picture in front of me, and a vague uneasiness tightened in my chest. "Wow, are you getting the best porcelain?" I remarked, trying to make my voice sound casual, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling of strange anxiety. "What kind of family gathering are we planning?" Mom and Dad exchanged glances, quickly, almost imperceptibly, but this fleeting exchange of glances was enough for me to understand that something was going on. Before I could ask what was the matter, the twins entered the dining room and took their usual seats across from me, as if it were just an ordinary dinner. But there was an invisible tension in the air, like a thin glass partition about to crack. Throughout dinner, the conversation remained painfully shallow. Mom told me about her garden club, where they are now growing some new varieties of roses. Dad mentioned the golf club, which he considers as a new place for his regular games. The twins were vying to share gossip about friends I didn't even know, and about some parties I didn't care about at all. But no one, even casually asked about my life, my work, or anything that really concerned me. And even though I wasn't used to special attention from my family, it was still strange, even insulting. I tried to distract myself with lasagna, and as always, it was perfect. The same as when I was a child. Rich tomato sauce, spicy herbs, stretching melted cheese, everything I loved. But even so, I couldn't really enjoy dinner because I felt like there was something in the air, something important that they didn't want to tell me about. When Mom brought dessert, homemade tiramisu, another of my favorite dishes, I already knew that they had chosen two of my favorite treats for a reason. I put down my fork, straightened up, and looked at my parents. "Good." His voice was flat, but there was steel in it. Mom pressed her lips together tensely, and Dad slowly put down the napkin and cleared his throat. "Marilyn," he began carefully, "you know, my mom and I are getting older, and we need to think about the future." I didn't say anything, just waited. "We decided to finalize our will and wanted to talk about it in person." "Okay," I drawled, still not understanding what they were leading to. Dad looked at Mom as if expecting her to support him, but she just nodded softly, and he continued. "We have decided that Tyler and Tiffany will get the house and cottage by the lake." There was silence in the room. I stared at my father, waiting for him to continue, but he didn't come. I asked, even though I already guessed what the answer would be. "That's all," Mom said, sounding strangely defensive. I felt something constrict in me, but I still asked the question that was spinning in my head. "So, nothing?" Mom frowned, and Dad rubbed the bridge of his nose tiredly. "You have to understand, dear." Mom said softly but firmly. "You're doing so well financially, and the twins are still looking for themselves. They need security more than you do." At that moment, something inside me snapped. I looked across the table at my brother and sister, trying to read something on their faces. But it took me 1 second to realize that they didn't feel a bit embarrassed or remorseful at all. On the contrary, there was complacency in their eyes, and barely suppressed smiles played on their lips, as if they had won in some kind of invisible but very significant game, of which only they knew the rules. "Just to be clear," Tyler drawled lazily, leaning back in his chair and leaning forward towards me with that condescending expression I've hated since he was a teenager and considered himself the smartest person in the room. "We wanted to tell you now so that there won't be any later confusion. Everything gets to us." Something tightened painfully in my chest, as if I'd been punched in the stomach, unexpectedly, without warning, without the slightest chance to defend myself. All. The house I've been helping pay the mortgage on for the last 4 years. The lake cottage I paid $30,000 to renovate last summer. I heard the blood rushing in my ears, and my fingers involuntarily clenched into a fist. Mom blushed, but there was no guilt in her eyes, just annoyance, as if I was spoiling this evening with my presence, as if I were an ungrateful daughter who did not understand simple truths. "It doesn't matter, Marilyn," she said in that soft but icy voice she always used when she was trying to put me in my place. "Family helps family, you know." I slowly raised my eyes to her and forced myself to say, "Yes, the family helps the family." I paused, watching as her lips tightened into a thin line, and my father looked away, as if he had suddenly found something incredibly interesting in his napkin. "For example, when I paid for their college tuition, or when I sent you $600 a month for household expenses." There was a heavy pause. They didn't even try to deny it. They just turned away, unable to meet my gaze. I felt my throat constrict and pain bubbling up inside me. Not from anger, no, from something much more destructive. "Oh, stop being so arrogant," Tiffany suddenly snorted, rolling her eyes and crossing her arms over her chest. "You've always been jealous of us because Mom and Dad love us more." I froze. "Excuse me?" "It's true," Tyler added calmly, shrugging his shoulders. "You always resented us because you had to babysit the kids while we were having fun. It's not our fault that you were born first." I abruptly looked at my parents, expecting them to say at least something, defend me, or at least refute these ridiculous accusations. But instead, Mom's face turned hard, and Dad just stared at the table, as if this conversation didn't concern him at all. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Marilyn," Mom said coldly, "talking about money over a family dinner. You've always been obsessed with counting every penny, while your brother and sister are struggling to find a good job in this economy. And whose fault is it that they can't hold down any jobs?" I asked angrily, feeling my rage rise. "Yours? Dad's? Or maybe mine? Because I think I'm the only one in this family who's somehow coping with real life." "Oh," Tiffany drawled, crossing her arms and leaning back in her chair with a triumphant smile. Jealous and greedy as always. I felt my fingers clench into a fist, a wave of indignation rising in my chest, but I didn't even try to restrain myself. I abruptly pushed the chair back and its legs slid across the floor with a dull screech. "Do you know what I see?" My voice was quiet but firm, cold as a knife blade. "I see that I have been supporting this family for years, receiving nothing in return except criticism. And now I find out that you have completely excluded me from the will." I paused, letting them process what I'd said. "For what?" I looked straight into my mother's eyes. "Because I'm responsible?" Dad stood up abruptly, his face tense and his lips pressed tightly together. "I think you should leave, Marilyn," he said, his voice hard, almost distant. "When you calm down and can discuss this rationally, then we can talk again." It took me a moment to realize that he had just kicked me out of the house. As I put on my jacket, trying to make sense of what was happening, I could feel their eyes on me. The twins were grinning at me from across the room. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out," Tyler called out cheerfully. "This is our house now, not yours." I went out, slamming the door harder than I should have. The road home was a blur, as if I was watching her through thick glass. All I could think about was how blind I'd been all these years. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, but I barely noticed the road in front of me. By some miracle, I got to my apartment without incident. "You're such an idiot, Marilyn," I muttered to myself as I kicked off my shoes in the hallway. Such a complete and utter fool. I went straight to the wine counter and grabbed a bottle of Cabernet, not the cheap wine I usually use for cooking, but the expensive one I was saving for a special occasion. Well, finding out that your family uses you as an ATM seemed pretty special to me. When I poured myself a generous glass and took the first sip, the warm wine burned my throat, and along with this familiar tart taste, memories came flooding back to me. A series of episodes from the past that I had tried for years not to notice, attributing to circumstances, to duty to my family, to my own responsibility, which, as it turned out, I possessed only I'm alone. I remembered how 3 years ago Tyler crashed his first car into someone's fence after a party, and how I didn't even think twice about giving him $5,000 for the down payment on a new one, because he needed reliable transportation to go to college, and how he smiled. He accepted the money without even thinking about offering to return it. I remembered how Tiffany suddenly decided last year that she wanted to become a yoga instructor because, according to her, working in a coffee shop kills her soul, and how I paid $2,500 for her certification program because my mother said it was an investment in her future. But 3 months after finishing the course, Tiffany lost interest in her new hobby and stopped practicing without getting a job at any of the sports centers that she allegedly considered. I remembered the cottage by the lake that my parents bought when I was just starting to build my career, and which they always called family. But the renovation after the pipe burst and the water flooded the floor, for some reason, turned out to be my concern. I invested $30,000 in it because I had to do it, but my parents didn't have that much money, and Tyler and Tiffany didn't even offer to help. The irony was that I had only been there twice since then, because there was always someone who occupied it before me, who apparently had more rights to it than I did. But the biggest and most constant expense was, of course, the monthly payments for the house, where my parents and the twins were currently sitting discussing how best to dispose of the family property. 4 years ago, they decided to move from their old house to a new one, which they literally fell in love with, but faced a problem. Their pension payments were not enough to cover the mortgage and related expenses. At first, they took the mortgage on themselves, but as soon as I got a promotion, they asked me to help. Not as a favor, no, but as a contribution to the family, because this is also your house. And so for 4 years in a row, every month, I sent $1,800 to pay off their mortgage, plus $600 monthly for utilities and taxes, $2,400 per month. I repeated this figure out loud as if trying to grasp the scale of what was happening. Then I opened the calculator on my phone, typed in the amount, and multiplied it by the number of months. $115,000. That was the amount I gave them. And after all that, they told me that I wouldn't get anything because I was fine? I raised my glass and took a long, deep sip, feeling the wine spread through my body with warmth and bitterness. But it didn't bring a drop of relief. To tell the truth, the inheritance was never important to me. I did not seek to get this house or cottage, but the way it was said, how they disdainfully dismissed everything I had done for them, as if my contributions meant nothing, as if I myself meant nothing, it hurt, for real. And using my favorite food as a bribe, this dinner, carefully prepared to soften me before the blow, this manipulation, it was all disgusting. I unlocked my phone, opened the banking app, and stared at the scheduled transfers. $1,800 for Mom and Dad for the mortgage, scheduled for the 15th. $600 is for utility bills scheduled for the 1st of each month. I took a deep breath, swiped my finger across the screen, and pressed cancel. Then she turned off her phone, finished her wine, and went to bed. I woke up the next morning easier than I had in years. For the first time, I didn't have to think about how to allocate another amount to pay someone else's bills. I could start saving for my own future. The next 2 weeks passed in complete silence. I immersed myself in work, stayed late at the office, brought projects home, worked on weekends, and the phone remained silent all the time. Not a single call, not a single message. It's like I never existed. It's like I disappeared from their lives exactly the moment I stopped paying for them. Exactly 14 days after that dinner, I heard my phone vibrate. A message from Mom. "Marilyn, don't forget, we have to pay the mortgage today, and we need money for the household by Friday. The electricity bill has gone up this month." I stared at the screen, unable to believe what I was reading. Seriously? After all that had happened, was she still expecting money? As if cutting me out of the will and humiliating me in front of the whole family was a common thing, which does not negate their right to demand money from me. Anger flared up instantly. I picked up the phone and quickly dialed the answer. I won't be paying my mortgage or bills anymore. I am not going to financially support a house in which, as you have made it clear, I have nothing to do. Please take other measures. I clicked send. Then she put the phone down on the table and took a deep, slow breath, trying to calm her racing heart. 15 minutes after I sent the message, the phone rang. I looked at the screen. Mom. I took a deep breath, clenched my fingers on the phone as if I could keep my anger under control, and pressed the answer button. "How dare you?" Her voice squealed into the receiver, skipping any greetings, any attempts to maintain at least the semblance of a normal conversation. "You can't just stop paying without warning. What should we do now?" I closed my eyes, counting to 3 before answering, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi to you too, Mom." "Don't you dare talk to me like that." She almost hissed, and I literally felt her grip on the phone, how icy her face must be right now. "You can't do this to us. We're your parents. You have obligations." "Actually, no," I interrupted her before she could finish. "I helped you voluntarily because I thought we were a family that supported each other. But after I found out that you and Dad decided to leave everything to Tyler and Tiffany, I realized that I was wrong. It's all because of the will," she snorted. "I knew it. You're just greedy and jealous. Your father and I raised you better than this." "No, Mom." I tightened my fingers on the phone even more. "It's not because of the will. It's out of respect." I paused, waiting for at least some reaction, but there was silence on the phone. Tense, expectant, angry. "I've spent years helping you financially. I could feel a lump rising in my throat, but I wasn't going to let myself cry. And in return, I was cut out of my will and insulted at dinner. I won't be a family piggy bank anymore." I hung up before she could answer and froze, feeling my hands tremble with tension. Almost immediately, the phone rang again. Mom again. I ignored the call. "Dad will be here in a minute." Then Tiffany. Then there's Tyler. I let go of the phone, letting all the calls go to voicemail, not wanting to hear their voices, not wanting to justify myself, not wanting to listen to their demands. The messages started coming one after another. Some are pleading. "Please, Marilyn, we can't live without you, you know." Others are furious, angry, full of accusations. "You selfish bastard." Tyler. "We're going to lose our house because of you." Dad. "I hope you're happy with yourself." Mom. I closed my eyes, feeling a heaviness rise inside me that hadn't been there before. After 2 days of this hell, I blocked all their numbers. I needed peace. But a week later, the phone started ringing again. This time it's from relatives. Aunt Linda first, then Cousin Steve. Even my dad's brother, who lives in Arizona and whom I haven't spoken to in years. Obviously, Mom didn't waste any time. "Your mom says you're trying to make them homeless." Aunt Linda's voice was both harsh and worried when I finally answered one of the many calls. "What's going on, honey?" I took a deep breath, trying not to scream, and began to explain. About the will, about dinner, about the fact that I've been paying off their mortgage for 4 years. "That can't be true." Aunt Linda's voice trembled, and there was genuine bewilderment in it. "Your mom told everyone that you just helped them with the down payment." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've been paying all the mortgage payments since they bought the house." I paused between the words to let her realize how absurd this was. "And plus utility bills. You can ask them yourself." There was a heavy silence. This was followed by similar conversations with other relatives. Some took my side. Some are on the parents' side. Some refused to believe that I was financially supporting my family at all, insisting that I was lying to make myself look better. And with every new meeting, every new call, every new accusation, a feeling of fatigue and anger grew inside me. I'm sick of I'm tired of their gossip, their whispers, their discussions behind my back. I'm tired of proving that I'm telling the truth. I opened Facebook, and I wrote everything as it is. I told them in detail how much money I gave them every month. I told them how they cut me out of their will. I told them how they tried to manipulate me through relatives. And she ended the post with the words, "I love my family, but I can't continue to subsidize their lifestyle while I'm being treated like an outsider. It's time for me to prioritize my own future." The post exploded, dozens of comments. Some are full of support. Others are angry, judgmental. "You're right. They were just using you. It's horrible. Hold on, Marilyn. A family shouldn't do that." But there were also those who condemned me. "How could you bring family matters out in public? They're still your parents. You have to take care of them. Money is nothing. Family ties are more important." I read the comments feeling a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. Relief because finally the whole truth came out. It was disappointing because even now some people still thought that I should comply and keep paying. But deep down, I already knew the answer. I'm not coming back. I won't change my mind. A month passed without any contact with my family, and despite the fact that somewhere in the back of my mind I was expecting another act of blackmail, manipulation, or accusations, nothing happened. The phone remained quiet. No one tried to get to me through friends or colleagues and social networks where it had recently flared up. The heated argument about my treacherous ingratitude also gradually subsided. I started to think that maybe they had finally accepted my decision. Maybe they had sorted out their finances and moved to more affordable housing. Maybe they had finally realized that I would not be returning. Meanwhile, life went on as usual. The job was as busy as usual, but now I didn't feel the fatigue I used to feel when every month I had to give a significant portion of my salary not to my dreams, but to the comforts of other people who didn't even appreciate my efforts. I finally allowed myself some financial freedom. I even made a deposit for a trip to Italy, which I had been dreaming about for years, but which I always didn't have enough money for, because I always had other, more important obligations. But peace never lasts long in my family. It was a typical Tuesday when my boss called me into his office and assigned me a new assignment, to oversee a project in Sacramento. The company had just completed the construction of a medical office, and they needed a person to conduct a final inspection, fix minor defects, and prepare customers for the start of operation. "It's only 3 days," the boss assured me, handing me the project folder. "You leave on Wednesday morning, return on Friday evening." I didn't argue. The work was interesting, the project looked promising, and the change of scenery seemed like a nice bonus. I packed up light, just my carry-on, laptop, and a few things I needed for work, and flew to Sacramento. The trip went perfectly smoothly. The client was delighted with the building. The inspections were successful. There were only minor details that did not require serious intervention, and I even managed to enjoy dinner at a small local restaurant recommended to me by the hotel concierge. When I boarded the plane on Friday afternoon, feeling satisfied with the work I had done, I had no idea that I would return home in a completely different mood than I expected. I got to my apartment building around 8 in the evening, a little tired but happy, looking forward to a quiet, relaxing weekend that finally belonged only to me. But when I entered the hallway and went to my door, one look was enough for me to make everything inside go cold. Something was wrong. I froze, feeling my stomach tighten with anxiety, when I noticed that the door frame was covered with a thick, congealed mass of foam that completely filled the keyhole and the gaps around the perimeter of the door. I put the suitcase down, came closer, and ran my fingers over the uneven surface. The foam has completely solidified. Someone deliberately blocked my entrance to my apartment. "What the hell?" I muttered, pulling my hand away and gritting my teeth. I took out my phone and dialed the building's emergency number, but all I heard was a voice message. Then I called the building manager. After 4 rings, a sleepy voice said, "Mitchell, what can I do for you?" Someone ruined the door of my apartment. I tried to keep my voice level, but anger and shock made my voice harsh. Someone sprayed her with foam. "I can't get in." There was a pause on the other end. "Foam? Around the door? What is it?" he asked, as if he hadn't fully understood the meaning of my words. "Yes. Okay, I'll call our lock service, but it might be a couple of hours before they can arrive. Today is Friday. I closed my eyes, feeling my shoulders tighten. I sat in the hallway next to my luggage for almost 3 hours. People passed by, some looked at me in surprise, some avoided eye contact, but no one asked why an adult woman was sitting on the floor with her suitcase in front of a door sealed with foam. When the locksmith finally arrived around 11, I was already on the verge of exhaustion and rage. He whistled as he examined the door. Someone really didn't want you to come in. There was a mixture of shock and professional curiosity in his voice. Can you fix it? I wasn't going to discuss the origin of the problem. I just needed to get inside. It won't be easy. He took out his tools and began to carefully cut off the frozen foam. But even with all his skill, the job took almost an hour. By midnight, I was finally able to cross the threshold of my apartment. I was exhausted and furious. I slammed the door shut, leaned back against it, and took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart rate. Someone deliberately blocked my door. Someone didn't want me to enter my apartment, and I had no doubt who could do such a nasty trick. I went to the kitchen table, dropped the phone, then reached over to the wine rack, took out a bottle of red wine without even looking at what I was taking, and poured myself a generous glass. Took a long sip, feeling anger throbbing in my temples. I put down my glass, grabbed my phone, and opened the blocked numbers. I've unblocked Tyler's number. Message. You've crossed the line. I'll find out who did it, and if it was you, believe me, you won't like the consequences. I hit send, turned off my phone, and threw my head back, feeling anger turn into cold, focused determination. This war was just beginning. Once inside my apartment, I immediately went to my laptop, barely noticing how my hands were shaking with rage and tension. Because no matter how hard I tried to stay calm, I already knew who was behind this vandalism. 6 months ago, when a package was stolen from my doorstep, I installed a surveillance camera in the hallway, pointing it directly at my front door. And now, sitting in front of the screen, I opened the archive of recordings with grim satisfaction, knowing full well that I was about to see irrefutable evidence. I rewound the recording to the desired time interval and clicked play. At first, nothing happened. Just an empty hallway, steady lamplight, neighbors' doors, silence. But then, on Thursday, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a familiar figure appeared on the screen. Tyler, my brother. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled down over his eyes and a hood pulled over his head. But I would have recognized his gait anywhere. Casual, confident, slightly loose, like a man who wasn't used to hiding. But this time, he was still trying to be careful. He looked around, then took out a spray can from his backpack and began methodically spraying foam around the doorframe. He worked carefully, trying to fill in every inch of the lock and the seam where the door joined the frame. And when he was done, he stepped back, as if assessing his work, and then hurriedly left. I watched the recording 3 times, and with each viewing, the anger inside me grew like a hot metal. It wasn't just a petty revenge. It was a deliberate vandalism, the damage from which was estimated at thousands of dollars, because replacing the door frame and repairing the entrance area would have been very expensive. The next morning, without hesitation, I took the video to the local police station and filed an official complaint against Tyler. The officer receiving the statement listened to me attentively, nodding periodically, and then, when I finished, asked, "Do you have any idea why he did it?" I chuckled briefly, but without a trace of humor. Financial disputes. I see. She didn't ask further, apparently. She'd already dealt with similar stories and continued to fill out the form. We'll have someone contact him for questioning. In the meantime, do you have a safe place to stay if you're worried about your safety? I'll be fine. I interrupted her, feeling annoyed at the mere suggestion that I should go somewhere, hide, leave my own territory. I just want him to be responsible for the damage. She nodded and continued typing. 3 days later, I got a call from the police station. "Ms. Mitchell, we've interviewed your brother." And? At first, he denied everything, but when we showed him the video, he confessed to the vandalism. I exhaled slowly, feeling grim satisfaction. Good. My voice was cold and impassive. What is happening now? We have charged him with criminal damage and damage to property, taking into account the cost of repairs. This is a serious charge, and he could face fines or probation. I thanked the officer and hung up almost immediately. The phone rang again. I looked at the screen and saw an unfamiliar number. I hesitated for a second, but I answered anyway. "Marilyn, what have you done?" I instantly recognized the voice. Father. He was almost screaming, his voice shaking with rage, as if I had done something terrible and not his son had vandalized. "The police have arrested Tyler. Your brother!" "They didn't arrest him, Dad." I interrupted him, this time not giving him any chance to manipulate me. "He was brought in for questioning after I filed a complaint, because he desecrated my apartment. He's just a kid." Dad was literally growling into the phone, as if he wanted to shout over reality. "He's 20. 4 years old." I pressed those words as if sealing the coffin lid to his argument. "And his mistake will cost me more than $3,000. The building manager said they had to replace the entire door and door frame. There was a tense silence on the other end of the line. When my father finally spoke, his voice was quieter but no less angry. "Is that what you do with your family? Are you calling the police?" I took a break, took a slow breath, and answered calmly, "A family does not desecrate each other's homes." There was a new pause. Then his father's voice changed, and now there was not only anger in it, but also something else. "What do we need to do to make it stop?" I felt an icy smile slip across my lips. $3,000. "What?" "Pay the repair cost." My voice was flat, emotionless, and hard. "Immediately. Then I will withdraw the complaint." "This is extortion." "These are the consequences." He stopped talking, and I knew he hated every word I'd just said, because for the first time in my life, I'd made them responsible. Tyler destroyed my property. I didn't raise my voice, but there was steel in the words. Now he needs to pay for it, or he may be dealing with the legal system. It's his choice. I heard his heavy breathing, and then he hung up, without additional words. No charges, no apologies, just silence. The next day, my mother called. Unlike my father, who was screaming with rage, her voice was cold, hard, distant. The tone of a man who had already made up his mind, and I could almost feel the icy expression on her face as she held the phone. "I never thought you'd stoop so low, Marilyn." I didn't answer right away, just waited because I already knew that what would follow would be a monologue, not a dialogue. "Use the police to take revenge on your own family?" she continued. "How could you?" I closed my eyes and forced myself to take a deep breath so as not to say something I would regret later. "It's not revenge, Mom." I purposely spoke slowly and clearly so that she wouldn't miss a single word. "This is holding Tyler accountable for his actions. He was upset. We were all upset because of you." "Because of me?" I raised an eyebrow, but I didn't give her a chance to elaborate because I knew where she was going. "We have to struggle to make ends meet." Her voice cracked, and I almost thought she was going to cry, but I knew better. "After relying on your help for so long, a mortgage company threatening to confiscate property," I held back the sarcastic reply that was on the tip of my tongue because deep down I knew that she was really scared. But it wasn't my fear. "I'm sorry you're having financial difficulties." I said it without malice, without mockery, just as a fact. "But that doesn't give Tyler the right to destroy my house." She was silent for a moment. And then, in a voice that showed strained restraint, she asked, "If we pay, will you drop the charges?" "Yes." "Good." Her voice was short, jerky, almost businesslike. "We will send you the money, but don't expect anything else from us." I almost laughed at the irony of this situation. 2 days ago, they accused me of betraying my family, and now they were haggling with me as if I were a stranger, as if I were a creditor and not their daughter. But to be honest, I didn't expect anything from them anymore. 2 days later, I received a bank transfer, exactly $3,000. Without a signature, no comments, without trying to fix the relationship. I contacted the police and said I didn't want to press charges. The officer I was talking to seemed disappointed. "Are you sure?" "Yes. I understand that family situations can be difficult." I grinned, but there was no humor in it. "You have no idea." With this money, I was able to properly repair the door. The building manager was sympathetic to the situation, but advised me to install additional security measures. I updated the video surveillance system, added a second lock, and then, for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to relax. It's been 6 months since I last spoke with my family. I didn't hear anything directly from them, but judging by conversations with Aunt Linda, who still called me every few weeks, things weren't going well for my parents. "They're struggling terribly with the mortgage, Marilyn," she said in one of our last conversations, and I felt a note of sympathy slip into her voice, but I didn't care. "They have exhausted most of their retirement savings trying to keep up with payments. Mom got a job as a waitress at a diner near their house. My father now works at a hardware store 6 days a week. But the most telling thing was that Tyler and Tiffany didn't help at all. Tyler got a job in retail, but quit after 3 weeks because the manager was completely unreasonable in demanding that he arrive on time," Aunt Linda informed me, and I had to stifle a grin. Tiffany occasionally worked as a babysitter for neighbors, but spent most of her time planning a lifestyle blog, which she never launched. And of course, the worst part of the whole story. Your parents still blame you for everything. I closed my eyes, waiting for that blow, but I didn't feel any pain. Your mom tells everyone who is willing to listen that you abandoned them when they needed you the most. I smiled, and I just changed the subject. Because I didn't care. My life has never been better. Last month, I was promoted to senior director with a substantial salary increase. I went to Italy, a country I've been dreaming about for years, and planned another vacation to Japan in the spring. Now I have a full-fledged home office in my apartment, where I can work in peace without feeling tied to something that destroys me. I made new friends in the tour group. I've been dating an interesting man for the last 2 months. For the first time in my adult life, my money is my own. My time is my own. My future is my own.